Good morning. Welcome to the fourth and final day of the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission annual meeting and the loveliest day of all. I hope you guys enjoy liquid sunshine. I am calling to order the Scienid Management Board. First order of business is approval of the agenda. Are there any additional items to add to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll consider that approved by consent. And you've had a chance to read through the voluminous proceedings of the previous meeting in August. Are there any changes, additions, deletions? Seeing none, we will consider those approved. And now we move to the time where the public has an opportunity to comment on anything not on the agenda. In the room, I see two members of the public if they wish to comment, and I see neither one of them. Is there anybody online?
No.
No one online. Very good. Well, we can get to the heart of the matter 15 minutes ahead of time. Tracy. And so we're gonna take up addendum 2 to amendment 2 to the Red Drum Fishery Management Plan. And the way we're going to do this is Tracy's going to walk us through each option one at a time. We will discuss the option, the public comment, all those sorts of good things, and then we will move on that option rather than going through the entire paper all at one time. So with that, Tracy, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, like Mr. Hammond said, going to start off with a very brief overview of the timeline, where we came from. Now that we're here, a little bit of background. I'm going to give an overall public comment summary and summary of the AP discussion before we delve into each specific issue one by one. And at that time, I will give the public comment and the AP discussion on each issue separately that was specific to that issue. So again, just as a brief reminder for everyone here and anyone online, 1 year ago, the Red Drum Benchmark Stock Assessment was approved for management use, and the board tasked the TC to look at next steps. And back in May, earlier this year, May 2025, the board initiated draft addendum 2, and public comment period was held last month in September, and today the board will be taking final action on draft addendum 2. So again, a little bit of background, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. In the 2024 benchmark stock assessment, the southern and northern regions were assessed separately with 2 separate assessments. The northern region had a stock synthesis model, the southern region had a stock synthesis model, and the northern region is currently using a traffic light analysis to assess stock status. The southern region red drum stock was found to be overfished and experiencing overfishing, and the northern region red drum stock was found to be not overfished and not experiencing overfishing. However, the red drum northern region's assessment did observe an increasing trend in fishing mortality. And red drum are currently managed under Amendment 2 from 2002, and in Amendment 2, it directs all states within a management unit to implement the appropriate recreational bag and size limit combinations to obtain the goal or target of 40% spawning potential ratio, SPR, or F40%. And in Amendment 2, it actually specifies a specific method, the Vaughan-Carmichael paper, that states need to use to determine what regulations obtain that 40% SPR target. And it did not provide any flexibility for states to use any other method to accomplish this. So moving on to the public comment summary overview. Before we move into each separate issue in the document, public comments were accepted through midnight on October 1st, earlier this month. 382 comments were received, with 377 individual comments and 5 written comments from organizations. We received comments from Massachusetts through Florida, with a handful of comments from states north of New Jersey saying that they come down south to fish for red drum. In that number of written comments received, a few people had also provided comment at the hearings as well. When I give you those numbers, something to keep in mind. And the organizations we received public comment from there's a joint letter between the American Sport Fishing Association with the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, 100 Miles, American Saltwater Guides Association, Release Over 20, and the Virginia Saltwater Sport Fishing Association. So 7 public hearings were held in September 2025. Overall, 187 people were in attendance at least one public hearing, but that number could include some people who attended multiple hearings, but does not include state staff, commissioners, or proxies in attendance, or commission staff. And a total of 34 comments were provided at the public hearings. So again, I'm going to go over a couple of general comments that don't apply to any specific management option in this document, but they were commenting on red drum. So I'm going to go through them now ahead of all of the options. So there were multiple comments that shared observations of how many red drum they were seeing in Georgia specifically for the most part. Some expressing concern that there were too many red drum. And did not believe any regulation changes should be made in Georgia. And in that line, at least one commenter expressed concern that any restrictions to the regulations made at this time might ever be lifted. There were 1 or 2 comments that also expressed concern with the assessment results and noted there are other important factors to take into account in an assessment, such as predation by dolphin and sharks that they were observing, and potential overabundance of food for red drum. Conversely, a number of commenters did not express, again, any support for any particular option in the document, but instead expressed general concern about the current state of the red drum population in their state and support for taking management action to conserve and protect the stock, particularly stressing the urgency to take action. Several commenters expressed support for prohibiting or limiting the targeting of mature spawning red drum and or closing known spawning areas in the fall. Multiple commenters expressed support for a catch and release only moratorium for red drum for at least a year. And there was also general support for lowering the 5 fish bag limits in the Potomac River Fisheries Commission in Georgia, which commenters thought was excessive and unsustainable. Multiple comments also stressed the importance of factors such as habitat protection and restoration, enforcement of regulations, and monitoring of discard mortality for red drum. Several comments also stated we should be addressing these issues, especially habitat restoration, instead of focusing on changes to regulations. Several comments expressed support for regulation changes to the commercial fishery and or the for-hire fishery specifically. Comments expressed support for states looking at additional regulations related to red drum fishing guide services. They were noting the frequency of their trips targeting red drum. Several comments provided or stressed the importance of the financial aspect of red drum to their respective communities. Several comments provided recommendations related to the need for more research into mortality rates of red drum due to improper tackle, such as through the use of non-offset circle hooks and J hooks. There was also a recommendation to encourage increased communication between the fishing community and managers. And there was one comment suggesting we look into Bayesian or hierarchical models for red drum. And lastly, a commenter expressed disagreement with allowing the public to keep fish smaller than 20 inches. This commenter stated people will keep fewer fish if they can take home larger fish. And then also in general, there was a number of comments that were suggesting specific regulation changes, which you can find in the public comment summary. So for the advisory panel, they met on October 8th. There were 4 members in attendance, 2 from Virginia and 2 from North Carolina. And prior to beginning any discussion on any of the issues, the AP had noted that there were no AP members in attendance that day from the Southern region, so they didn't feel comfortable commenting on any Southern region specific issues. And again, like public comment, I just wanted to share some of the AP discussion that doesn't fit under any specific option, which primarily focused on current trends related to red drum in Chesapeake Bay. One AP member noted that they've been observing an influx of trophy-sized fish, and keeper fish have been more difficult to find. Another AP member has been observing decent numbers of puppy drum, and one AP member noted that red drum abundance in Chesapeake Bay is highly episodic, and with the bay being overrun with red drum in some years, and they're harder to find in others. And then lastly, one AP member noted their belief that currently the striped bass and red drum fisheries in the bay are not directly in competition, and thinks more recreational fishermen are targeting red drum now in the bay due to the declines in large croaker. All right, so we are going to be moving into the management options. There are 5 separate issues in this addendum, and as always, the board will have the opportunity to select any measure within the range of options that went out for public comment, including combining options across issues. So first, section 3.1, alternative state management regimes, which would apply to both the northern and southern regions. So this issue in the addendum directly addresses that problem that I previously stated, that states can no longer use the Vaughan and Carmichael methodology in Amendment 2 to determine which regulations obtain the fishing mortality goal, as that methodology is no longer considered the best available science, nor directly comparable to outputs from the modern red drum assessment. Instead of Addendum 2 identifying a new specific method for states to use to determine which regulations will allow states to achieve the fishing mortality goal, the board expressed interest in allowing for future flexibility by developing a process which allows states to propose changes to regulations in response to new information on the stock. And so as a part of this process, new methodologies to estimate the impact of regulation changes on fishing mortality could be proposed and approved by the board. And importantly, establishing this process at this time would allow the southern region states to respond to the results of the recent benchmark assessment. So in section 3.1, there's option A, where red drum management would continue to be limited to what's in Amendment 2 to determine the impact of regulations on catch and fishing mortality. And option B, which would establish this new process to allow states in either stock to propose changes to their management measures. And this process would typically occur following the acceptance of a stock assessment for management use by the board to end to prevent overfishing. The process, in short, would be that states would develop proposals, the technical committee would review the proposals and make sure that they follow the board-approved methodology, and then states would implement the regulations. States could gather public input within their state on their own at any time during this process. And option B also includes language to clarify that if a state has already implemented regulations to reduce catch following the final year of an assessment, data from MRIP could be used to estimate actual realized reductions achieved to determine the impact of those regulation changes on catch. So for the public comments received regarding section 3.1, there were no comments that expressed support of status quo, option A. All comments received supported option B, and the commenters noted that option B would modernize red drum management and allow states the flexibility to select measures that account for local preferences. And the AP did not comment on this issue specifically. So, Mr. Chair, if you would like to pause here, that is the end of section 3.1.
Thank you, Tracy. Any questions for Tracy on 3.1, public comment, or anything of that nature? Any discussion on 3.1? Erica.
So, question, comment. This addendum goes back and forth between the use of region and stock. It was assessed as 2 separate stocks. I think using the term region gives a different connotation that they're not separate stocks. So I would prefer, if when this is cleaned up for final, that the addendum replace region with stock.
As long as it's the same meaning in the sentences that we change, we can do that at the board's will. But if it was intended to mean something different than that, then we would leave it as, for that sentence, we would leave it be.
Thank you for that explanation, Tony. Ben?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the essence of time, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion on this option. I believe staff have that, and I can speak to it if, once it's read.
Go ahead, Ben.
Thank you. Move to adopt option B, establish process to adjust management measures for section 3.1. If I get a second.
A motion and a second by Spud Woodward. Okay, Ben, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly nothing personal if John Carmichael's in the room or listening online, but the great work that he did and Vaughn, but as it's mentioned that this is no longer the best available science, and that option B would allow the state's flexibility along with the board to make the best decisions in what's right for their management options in regards to the stock assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any members of the public wishing to speak before we vote? Any members of the public online wishing to speak? Very good. Is there any opposition to this motion? Seeing none, this motion passes. Thank you. 3.2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So moving on to section 3.2, allow alternative methods to estimate fishing mortality for use in management, which would apply to both the northern and southern regions unless otherwise specified by the board in their motion. So section 3.2, allow alternative methods to estimate fishing mortality, and the draft addendum originates from a request by some members of the board. This issue is meant to proactively address concerns from board members that delays to future assessments may delay a state's ability to reevaluate the impacts of red drum management on the stock, or force states to use outdated methods to provide management advice on red drum. Current commission guidelines found in the commission's technical committee guidance document state that alternative analyses or methods to assess a stock must be submitted within the commission's assessment process. So whenever a new benchmark assessment occurs, to be considered for management use. So, for example, if a state completes its own assessment of a substock between commission assessments and finds out that there's been improvements to the stock status of their substock currently in the commission's red drum fishery management plan or any commission document, there is not a process to allow a state to bring forward those results to make adjustments to their management measures. So this leads to the options for section 3.2. First, there's option A, status quo, which follows the current guidelines found in the technical committee guidance document that outside assessments should be brought forward during a commission benchmark stock assessment if a group would like their assessment to be considered for management use. Alternate assessments are subject to the same standards, documentation, and process as commission assessments, including stock assessment subcommittee, technical committee, and independent peer review. Option B would establish a process to allow for states to propose alternative methods to estimate fishing mortality and use these results to make management decisions outside of the commission's assessment process. So briefly, the process described or proposed in option B would include the following steps. States would submit their method or analyses to the technical committee. The technical committee would review these analyses. The board would also have the option to recommend additional review by the assessment science committee. The board then would review the recommendations from the technical committee and the assessment science committee, if applicable, and would make the decision whether to improve those methods for management use. And if the methods are approved for management use by the board, then the states would follow a similar process as described in the section we just went over, 3.1, to submit a proposal with management measures to be approved by the board. So in summary, for public comments received on this option, a majority of the comments were in favor of status quo, but there were several comments in favor of option B. And some of the reasoning behind there's support for either option A or option B. So for status quo, comments expressing support for option A express support for any new assessment methods undergoing rigorous review with the current process, which would ensure that there's transparency and that consistency is remained among regional partners. For the comments that supported option B, allowing alternative methods to estimate fishing mortality, they pointed towards the review by the technical committee and the assessment science committee, which they argued would mirror the rigor of a formal review process to ensure that the alternative methods are technically sound. And they also put forward that option B would improve the timeliness of new information and allow for additional flexibility for the states in the management of red drum. And like section 3.1, there were no AP comments in regards to this issue. So, Mr. Chair, I'll hand it over to you. That's the end of section 3.2.
Thank you very much, Tracy. I'll just say as we begin this next two sections, right, that I'm very respectful of the public comment that came in, and I'm speaking specifically to Georgia's standpoint. But I know a lot of the members of the public that were there and the ones that commented, and it was very heavily guide oriented, and guides were pushing the issue, and I to me there was a bit of lack of understanding of some, particularly in 3.2, and you see that in the fact that they want transparency and consistency. And I don't think there's a more transparent or consistent process than what the commission goes to make rules. And I think, for at least me, that's where a lot of that comment was coming from. So I'll say that and open it for discussion. Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question. For the board, when if it desires in this process, if option B is chosen, to have the ASC review, is that going to necessary to be done through a majority vote, or is it any board member that requests that review to the ASC?
I need to read how the option read real quick.
Sure.
Yep.
So Tony's going to dig into that for just a second, and we'll look for others. Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tracy, I should know this from reading the draft addendum a couple of times at least. But did the PDT give any recommendations on if option B was chosen? What kind of timeline there should be before that's considered? Should we have like management in place for a certain amount of years or a certain number of years removed from the last stock assessment? I didn't know if they gave any guidance on that or not.
I believe in some of the discussions, maybe not so much with the PDT, but when we discussed some of this with the technical committee and the stock assessment subcommittee, I think there was some talk of possibly at least 3 years.
Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I have a second question, I guess, while we're figuring out the first. So just for clarity, and I believe it says this in here, so I apologize. But as Chris said, I've read this a few times. If option B is chosen and it goes through the process and reviewed by the committees, and the board moves forward with some alternative measures for F, is that then automatically how it's going to be set for specific regions, or is that going to be for a specific state, or is it an and or is it only an or? Does that make sense?
I think so. The way I had interpreted this option is that the alternative methods to estimate F, if they were accepted for management use, is that the situation that you're asking about? That it would be a stopgap until we could reevaluate the region as a whole. That was how I interpreted it, but I'm not sure if there were other interpretations of that.
Thank you. Erica?
So for the stocks, there where you would evaluate F, want to make sure that we're using consistent terms. That is how the current fishery is assessed. I think it would be premature to say it would have to be one or the other. I think it would depend upon the developed methodology and whether the states within the region have the data to demonstrate what that F would be. So I'm comfortable with leaving it open and letting the TC and ASC guide us as a management board in its applicability and use.
Tony, to answer Ben's question?
Thank you. Ben, I think that this board could specify and then we could put it in because it's pretty loose in how it's written here. So there's not a lot of specificity. So if you want to say a board member, we can get that into the document. Or if it needs to be a majority vote of the board, then we would put that into the document. But I do think it would be helpful if you're looking for just to let us know what you want us to put in here.
Carrie?
Yeah, I just wanted to make the point that I think in a time of, changing stock distributions, that it is important for the commission to have additional processes that allow flexibility as we sort out and figure out new ways to do things. I think we need to try doing things like this more. So I definitely think option B is the way to go.
Thank you. Rich, did you have something?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a comment that, estimating F at the state level, that is not an easy feat. And then going to and tasking the TC and the ASC to evaluate or justify those estimates is it's not an easy task either. So I'm just a little bit concerned about option B there. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that there are some states with a lot more robust programs than ours and are capable of doing that. And I don't think that we should limit those states' ability to suggest their internal management. That's my opinion. Any others? Any other discussion? Spud?
No discussion, but I'm ready to make a motion, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
If they'll
Thank you.
put it up on the board for us, please. All right, I move to adopt option B, establish process to adjust state management measures, allowing for alternative methods to estimate fishing mortality for section 3.2. And I'll certainly
I have a
add
second from
comments if
Dave.
needed.
Thank you. Discussion. Want to follow up on that, Spud?
Yeah, I think, there's been some discussion about it. I think it's certainly valid, and I think it's actually a very necessary complement to what we just approved in 3.1. That be able to evaluate alternative management approaches is certainly consistent with what we've tried to do across many other species in the commission. Obviously, if the state has the capacity to estimate fishing mortality, that's going to be part and parcel to them being able to evaluate the efficacy of an alternative management approach, as well as any reviewers of that. And I just echo what you said when we first started discussing this. I do think that there's an erroneous perception that the review under option B would not be very rigorous, and it would be a pathway for states to maybe engage in a more risk-prone approach, and I certainly don't think that's the case at all. So, thank you.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in a tough position because as much as I agree with what Spud just said, that this type of process is very important. I still have real concerns with, what was put forward so far here for this. We manage a lot of species. We've had unique situations in the past. I've been trying to think about what is the most relevant connections to this. I think about striped bass and the Albemarle Sound, but we're talking about stocks that we were given some confidence we're not necessarily migratory stocks. We treat speckled trout the same way. We've had many conversations about whether or not ASMFC should even be involved. But these stocks are migratory. I think that to even consider something like this for some of our other species is would be shocking to people, quite frankly. So I don't know that we quite got there yet on the methodology laid out. As Rich said, I think it's a very difficult task for the TC and ASC to be the ones that would have to do that. And that so far, that's my biggest concern. I would much rather see, if we were talking about a stock that was less migratory, that you're evaluating a much smaller F rate, and that and there was still a peer review process. Even we've done desk peer reviews for this species before. Even that being thrown out there is a little more comforting to me. So I can't support this. I'm sorry, and I do agree that we need to get to a place where we can do this for some stocks, but.
Chris Batsevich.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have the same concerns as Joe and Rich, and I've had these concerns when this was brought up at an earlier meeting. It comes down to trying to compare a state level stock assessment to the coastwide stock assessment for the same population. The challenges of getting an F rate was already discussed, but I'm trying to understand how biomass estimates would be comparable in that case. I agree that option B is more timely compared to the stock assessment schedule. But I think I need to remind the board that based on the stock projections for the southern stock, the stock rebuilding time is measured in decades. So probably won't see any major changes right away in the status. So with that, I'd like to offer a substitute motion, move to adopt option B for establishing a process to adjust state management measures, allowing for basically option B for section 3.2. Oh, option A, sorry.
So I would suggest that rather than offering a substitute for option A, you just vote down option B if that's what you want. I mean, there's only two options there, right? Either A or B. If you want B, you vote down. If you want A, you just vote down B. Well, I understand that's my prerogative. So let's just, if it's okay, I mean, Chris, if you're interested in A, then I would suggest vote no on this particular motion. Okay, Erica.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The previous guidance we had as a management board for setting measures to not overfish and lead to overfishing this fishery came from 2001, and we didn't have any new guidance since. If we have to wait until a new assessment, and assessing this species is incredibly difficult with the inshore fishery operating largely on juveniles and the offshore fishery being completely unknown, we have great challenges and great uncertainty with the assessment results and with the assessment methodologies that we can use. 3.2 provides a way for states with data to use alternative methods, and we have no control really over when a new benchmark assessment occurs. We have seen, and we're currently under, federal uncertainty with funding. We have no control over when CEDAR will take up our projects. We have things delayed like cobia on a routine basis. So this provides a way not for states to not to provide a way for states to carte blanche do whatever they want, or even the stocks and the states that manage those stocks to do whatever they want, but for them to bring options before the board to be reviewed by the technical committees and the assessment science committee, and then have that information brought back to the board. I think there is a high level of scrutiny that any state would be put under, and eliminating any alternatives is really, I don't think, in this board's best interest.
Thank you, Erica. Apologies for the technical issue. Spud, then Mel.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. One about this migratory behavior aspect. I've been working with red drum before some folks in this room were even born, and we've learned a lot in those ensuing decades. And really, I mean, we mistakenly treat the southern stock as having the same migratory behaviors as the northern stock, and it really doesn't. We do contribute to a shared spawning biomass to a point. They are genetically identical, but behaviorally they are segregated in time and space to a point. I have personally caught fish, adult fish, that I tagged a year later in the same spot. So there is a lot of site fidelity back too. So functionally we have substocks. And those substocks are subject to highly variable fishing pressure and environmental constraints when you move from Florida all the way up to the Virginian, the South Carolina, North Carolina line. So I think this is respectful of what we've learned. And, I think there's a time when we need to even question whether our traditional interstate management approach to a species like red drum is valid and warranted. And so I think this moves us in that direction with proper accountability measures in place to ensure that we don't violate the basic ethos of why we're here, and that is shared conservation across the board. But it also puts it back proportionally to what we know and how to manage the balance between access and opportunity and conservation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Similar to what Spud was talking about, I think option B here kind of dovetails nicely with 3.1 in terms of flexibility for states. And not all states are, their coastlines are different. And some states have a lot more coastline and the possibility of isolated areas and the possibility of substocks. I think the way that I understand this works, the state would have to provide data for their request. If there's a review from the TC, there's oversight from the board, there's review from the ASC. So I don't think it could be misused, perhaps. I'm a little sensitive to the concept of substocks because of our cobia situation, where cobia being highly migratory, even though they are, we manage a southern cobia area within our state separately from the other parts of the state, because through genetics work and tagging work, we were able to determine extreme site fidelity for cobia in our southern sounds. And I think, I don't think it's technically been classified yet, but it's basically a distinct genetically distinct population segment. So there can be situations within these species where the ability for a state, if they have the data, they can support their argument. I think this provides them an option, and a lot of the other states won't. If you don't have the coastline, the same layout in terms of how the estuaries are set up or isolated, you won't have a need to do that. But I think it's a useful thing to have available for states, again, with the idea of flexibility to match the state. And as Erica said, we've been operating the same way since 2001, and it's quite a few years later, and some states do have the capacity to generate the data that they need, a little better than other states. So I personally would be supportive of B.
Thank you, Mel. Joe?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate. I guess several of us have gone a few times, but this is really important, and I think fundamentally important. I'm not again. I'm not trying to argue the notion that something like this needs to happen. I just think fundamentally to just suddenly say like the TC and I don't even know how many people know what the AISC is. To say, well, that's the same as a peer review and we can move forward. I think another reason to discuss COBIA is that we may be in that situation with the CDAR with delayed, with delayed help. We may not have information on where the terminal year for that stock is for a very long time. We need this type of information. I realize we need any type of alternative information we can get. And so I may be looking to staff a little bit too about like, the difference between a peer review versus what these boards can use for additional information if, like, say for COBIA, I think we're going to be in a situation where we're a decade out from where the terminal year was assessed in the last peer review assessment. We need other information to make management decisions. My concern here is just the way this was spelled out is like, well, it's the same as a peer review. There's a lot of rigor. And I think that's a dangerous precipice to be on.
Tony?
So I guess a couple of things. Just a reminder to the board that you do have the ability to ask for a peer review and a change in the peer review schedule at any point in time along the way. It goes to the policy board, we evaluate, and if it's a major priority for a species board, then that carries all the way to the policy board and we do our best to adjust schedules. We did do peer reviews between 2001 and now for Red Drum. One of them, the board did not accept the results of, and I'm not saying that that's not the message that we were doing, but I just want to remind for those that weren't around then that did happen, and it is hard science to evaluate. But when we do peer reviews, we pull individuals with the expertise for that specific species, that type of modeling. And so there's going to be likely a higher level of expertise to evaluate that information than you're going to have from a TC or even the ASC. And so it is just a higher level of information, as Rich said. For some of these species, it's very difficult to assess, and you may need that higher level of expertise when reviewing that information.
Thank you. I would add that we are speaking of one species here, and perhaps this is an opportunity to test a model that we haven't used before, allowing an individual state to, especially a state like Florida that I think has as much review expertise and review capability as any other state along the Atlantic coast. So, Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Without trying to put anyone on the spot, I'm just curious whether ASC members that are in this room or commission technical staff that perform this type of work, if they're comfortable with this approach. Is it reasonable and not putting people on the spot to ask for an opinion in that regard from folks in this room? Thanks.
So I'll look around the room for expertise.
So I think I would agree with how Tony put it, that the peer review panels that are developed are based on specific needs for that species and assessment. So I'd say that the ASC is a more general body that may not have that expertise.
Any additional discussion or questions? Erica.
So I would like to say when Florida helped bring this option forward, we consulted with the Fish and Wildlife Research Institute, which is part of our state agency, and Dr. Louise Barbieri was heavily involved in crafting this. Dr. Louise Barbieri has contributed to the advancement of marine fisheries management in the US, leading multiple National Science Foundation, National Science Academy programs, has served a long time with this board, and he feels very comfortable with this.
Thank you. Is there any members of the public who wish to speak before we take this vote? Anyone online? Okay, we don't see anyone. With that, let's move the vote forward. All those in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Do you need to call states?
Yep.
Okay.
Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Virginia, Potomac River Fisheries Commission, Maryland,
Opposed?
New Jersey, North Carolina,
Nulls? Abstentions?
Delaware.
1 abstention. Great. Tony, question before it's announced.
You can announce.
Okay, so the motion passes 6-2-1-0.
So since this passed, just going back to Ben's question that he had asked before, is there a preference from this board to identify that it has to be a majority vote of the board to go to the ASC, or can a single board member ask for it to go to the ASC and it automatically does? Because I think that clarity will be helpful in the future.
Ben, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As much as I would like to say one board member to allow for, to ensure that if we're looking at this species under separate stocks as well, sometimes within a board, that might allow some more flexibility, but I don't take lightly also the tasking of such action on the ASC with just one board member. So I would assume I would suggest a majority vote, but I'm open to hearing from my other board members. Thank you.
So, Gary, to that point. Wait.
Yeah, to that point, I agree with Ben. I think, especially understanding the burden of, that we would be asking TC members, ASC members to do this work. It probably shouldn't be quite so easy to ask for this to get done. I think running it through a majority vote of the board provides some guardrails on, for lack of a better word, willy-nilly tasking of the TC to just constantly be reviewing stock assessments.
Tony.
I guess I don't think that there's anything in this document that prevents a state from bringing an alternative assessment to this board. I guess, and I didn't take this option as it was written that it's the board's vote. Like once a state brings it to the board, then it's in front of the board to consider. So I guess the board could immediately vote it down to not be used. But I would assume that when a state brings it forward that it would want some guidance from the TC or the ASC. And so it'd just be helpful to know where that should go. And as Jeff pointed out, the TC may not have the expertise to review an assessment.
I thought I heard Jeff say the opposite. The TC had more expertise on it than the ASC. I missed that.
So I was speaking specifically to the ASC, which is a general body that has a member appointed from each state and not necessarily appointed in terms of expertise in a certain area. So I think that's a more generalized body. I think the technical committee obviously has expertise in red drum management and assessment. I think if they were uncomfortable with certain aspects that were outside their realm of expertise, that they would then, the next step would be to recommend this go to ASC, and that's where it's a more generalized body.
But, and I think that the general question was whether a single individual member of a board could request that to happen, or it needed to be a majority vote. And I think that we've always operated under a majority vote. I don't know that we've ever had a single individual push an issue, right? So I would suggest it's majority, but Bob.
Yeah, I think in general, tasking of technical committees or any subordinate group isn't done by one person. It's done by the board or, policy board or whatever it might be. So that what you said is consistent with kind of how we operate in other species.
Thank you. I'm comfortable. Roy?
I would just remind everyone that TCs are not always made up of stock assessment scientists. And I'd say the majority of the members probably aren't. So again, I think we would be looking to the ASC for that type of technical advice, maybe even to advise the TC.
And Ben, and then Spud for the last.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Roy took exactly what I was going to mention. And I'd even go further to say that it might be beneficial that the ASC is somewhat of a general body, as where the TC is made up directly of folks that are focused on this subject. So taking any biases potentially out of any decisions that might be, the ASC has that general expertise with a little higher, as I understand, a little higher technical expertise than potentially some of the TC members. So I would be very interested in almost, if this process comes through, it almost be automatic that the ASC reviews it. I don't know if that's, the option that's what I would prefer to see. But the way the addendum's written, it's that or we can task. And, but if that is the case and we are going to task, then I still stick with what Bob mentioned, and that we should do that through majority vote to be consistent with the way we do our processes. Thank you.
Ben, if memory serves, it was written where it was automatically TC'd in ASC, and we decided at the last meeting that we didn't want that. It was a preference, and that's where the change came. Spud?
Yeah, I just want to follow up on something that Tony said and make sure I understand how this would work. If this was brought forward to the board could not take an action, either positive or adverse, until it had gone through at least TC review. That's the way I interpret this. There at least has to be that before the board can disqualify it or endorse it or recommend it go to the next step, or even potentially say that based on the ASC's recommendation, there needs to be a peer review, and then we have to figure out how to get that done. So is that the sequencing of this? That's the way I understand it. I don't see how the board could just say, well, we think it's a bad idea, and nobody has even looked into it from a technical standpoint.
So if we read page 11 of the document, number 2 says the proposals will be reviewed by the TC to ensure data analysis are technically sound. The TC would evaluate the state's proposed action based on whether it contributes to overfishing of the resources defined by the FMP, the public input, blah, blah, blah. Number 3, the proposals would be presented to and approved by the board. At that point, and I'm stepping away from the document now, at that point, the board could decide it needs additional review and send it to the ASC. So I'm pretty clear on how this needs to function. All right, so it goes to TC, to the TC, then to the board decides. Okay, any additional discussion? All right, let's, in the interest of time, move on to 3.3.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So section 3.3, management program, is the next topic in draft addendum 2, and may also apply to both the northern and southern regions. But again, this would apply unless otherwise specified by the board in their motion. So this issue originates from the board's motion from the May 2025 meeting, where the board requested the draft addendum consider a different level of fishing mortality states would need to implement to not exceed, looking at F 30% instead of the current F 40% that's in Amendment 2. And I do want to note that addressing this request would not impact the biological reference points, such as the definition of overfishing, that are found in Amendment 2. So Section 3.3 provides options that specify a fishing mortality level that states would need to achieve through proposed and implemented regulations. Option A, status quo, is that states must implement an appropriate bag and size limit that will attain the target of 40% spawning potential ratio, SPR, or F40%. Option B establishes a requiring fishing mortality level of 30% SPR or F30%, which states would need to achieve to end overfishing through proposed or implemented management measures with the target of decreasing fishing mortality below the fishing mortality associated with 40% spawning potential ratio. And the plan development team had noted that if option B is selected by the board, then all states in the southern management stock would be required to implement regulations expected to reduce fishing mortality below the threshold of F30%. So for Section 3.3, the public comment, majority of comments were in support of maintaining the 40% spawning potential ratio as the goal. And for option B, there were a few comments that were in support of option B. So some of the thought processes behind those who supported both option A and option B. So those who submitted public comment in support of status quo option A noted that at 40% SPR provides an increased probability of conservation of red drum, and they believed that going lower was not supportable. And they had noted, multiple comments had noted that we need to keep future abundance in mind when we're setting our goals that we would like to, our fishing mortality goals. And people who submitted comments in support of option A also noted that they wanted to, or that they thought that we needed to aggressively and proactively address the problem of declining fish stocks instead of shifting the goalposts, especially with the increasing fishing pressure from an increasing coastal population. And several comments also noted that they wished for red drum abundance to rebound as quickly as possible, and they thought that going with status quo would achieve that. Comments that supported option B, establishing a required fishing mortality level of 30% SPR or F30%. These comments put forward that F30% still ends overfishing, and the comments expressed their belief that the need to manage to F40% is punitive to the southern stock. They also noted the lack of a stock recruitment relationship and how recruitment is influenced more by environmental variables than spawning stock biomass. So they thought managing to F30 versus F40 wasn't as big of a influence on SSB compared to environmental variables. And one commenter also argued that instead of looking at F40 versus F30%, problems could be addressed through angler advocacy and cooperative partnership with state management authorities as a different route to go for red drum conservation. So the AP did provide some comments on section 3.3. It was noted during the AP's discussion that currently section 3.3 would only apply to the southern region. However, the benchmark stock assessments are scheduled to occur approximately every 5 years, and as a result, SPR estimates may be available in the future for the northern stock. So section 3.3 may impact the northern stock in the future. One AP member abstained from a recommendation, but did express agreement with some public comment that I just went over, that the environmental conditions or variables are more responsible for variability in red drum recruitment compared to the spawning stock biomass of red drum due to that lack of the stock recruitment relationship. And again, questioned whether F40% versus F30% would have a large impact on red drum abundance. And then two AP members supported option A, status quo at 40%, and one AP member who had supported option A had expressed concern with the motivation from switching between F40% and F30%. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will hand it back over to you. That ends my overview of 3.3.
Thank you, Eric. And once again, just a comment on public comment, at least specific to Georgia. And I am very respectful of the public comment, but the fact that it was unanimous is interesting to me because a lot of the individuals that I spoke to at the meeting and afterwards were in favor of keeping our regulations where they are, which is 5 fish. And I think they saw status quo as keeping it at 5 fish. And it's just, I think there was some confusion there. There was an awful lot of guides there as well who want to see us go from 5 fish down to 1 or 2 fish, and they knew that 40% would get us there. So anyway, I don't know that there was a full understanding, but let's open it up to discussion. Roy, then Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This may be outside of our purview as a northern de minimis state, but I wondered if a compromise would be possible here, since it went to public hearing with both 40% and 30%. If someone were to propose 35% as a compromise, that's within the range of what went to public hearing. So Tony is shaking her head yes. I presume such a compromise would be okay?
Yes, right.
I don't know if I'm prepared to make that yet, because again, we're talking about a northern state weighing in on measures that at this point in time would apply typically to the southern region. So I'll let that go for the moment. Thank you.
I appreciate that sentiment, Roy, and the understanding that we are looking at separate stocks. We certainly have the option in a moment of separating this by stocks, and I hope we have some discussion to that point. Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to piggyback on Roy's comment, the end of his comment of separate stocks and yours, given that this species is two separate stocks, in a southern regional stock and a northern regional stock, that are currently managed under two separate regimes, where the southern stock did have a successful stock synthesis model completed and accepted for management use, and in the northern that was unsuccessful and utilizing a traffic light assessment, with the southern region having that ability to have a known SPR and where that needs to go in regards to this specific option, and then the lack thereof for the north. I propose that we separate this this option into separate stocks, and I have a motion ready for that, and I believe staff does too.
Okay, thank you, Ben. I think we're pulling that motion up. There
Move to separate issue 3.3 and addendum 2 for the northern region stock. Is it possible to add that in there, since we both use both terms? Is that helpful throughout the document? So southern region stock. Stoic. And the southern region stock, so that the decision is independent for each region's preferred management program.
Is the motion as we want it? Ben's motion says you want it?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Is there a second? Spud. Discussion on the motion. Ben, you want to add anything else?
I don't have much to add. I believe, as I mentioned, currently right now, this is directly affecting and impacting the southern stock, as we do have the ability to measure and manage to that these thresholds, whatever is decided, where currently that is not achievable in the northern region. So, and I would leave that maybe to them to decide as the northern stock region and how they would prefer to move forward once they have the ability to assess that stock and create a stock assessment to determine SPR, to know where that stock is sitting, to then make those decisions as they move forward. But it's, again, being managed completely separate regimes right now currently. So I think it's prudent to separate these stocks for this specific option. Thank you.
Thank you. Spud, anything to add?
No, I think he pretty much explained the logic behind this. And I do think when you do have a situation where you've got a dichotomy in your scientific advice, that giving yourself the ability to treat those two situations differently, it's just a prudent, common sense approach to management.
Thank you. Adam.
Would a vote in the affirmative for this essentially create F40% as status quo for both region stocks as a starting point, or what? Where does that leave F as a starting point for those regions if we vote in the affirmative here?
That's the way I would read it. It's currently F40%, so I would suggest that status quo remains the same for both stocks.
Yes, that's correct, Adam.
So I hear this as the board saying you want to be able to vote separately on the answer to that question. And so here you're just saying we are going to take two separate votes, one for the northern region and one for the southern region. If the northern region does not want to change from 40%, then you don't have to vote at all and it will stay that way. If the southern region wants to change, then they need a motion to change that.
Yeah, but I think that's Adam's point, is that status quo is 40 for both at this point. So, yeah. Ben.
Thank you. Excuse me. That was my intention with the motion, was to just go ahead and separate and then have two separate votes, or if again the northern stock is preferred to stay exactly as you are, then as Tony said. So that was my intention. Thank you.
Any additional discussion on this motion? Anyone in the public or online? Seeing none, is there any opposition? See one opposed.
North Carolina is opposed.
All right, so now let's take the southern stock first. Is there any discussion on option A or B for the southern stock?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion and then I'll explain my rationale.
So right ahead, please.
I'd like to move to adopt option B for the southern stock for 3.3, section 3.3.
Second by Spud Woodward. Rationale, Erica.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I observed the same thing in public comment. I saw and heard again and again that this option B in section 3.3 was moving the goalpost, when in fact the goalposts remain the same. The goal is to get to F40. The threshold is to get to F30. We just approved an option for section 3.1 that said that the goal and the requirements would be to end overfishing. And achieving F30 would end overfishing for this stock. So this option gets us to where we said we need to get to now. Like, this is what we need to achieve, and this is the ultimate utmost importance. Florida had changed regulations to be more conservative, closing off essentially half of our coastline where red drum occur, and making it catch and release only based on habitat conditions and declining suitability for redfish in that area. The northern section of our state, we reduced the bag limit in half. We reduced the vessel limit in half. We have the most conservative regulations for that in the southern stock. We have a slot limit. We're fishing on 1 year class of fish. And we don't yet have the ability to fully evaluate the impact of those changes. Setting F30 does not prevent a state, should they so choose, setting that as our requirement does not prevent a state, should they so choose, from going above and beyond that. It merely says every state agrees that we will end overfishing collectively, and that is the most important thing that we achieved today. Thank you.
Thank you. And the secretary, any additional?
I guess just a couple of things to emphasize. One is, again, as you said, when we're binding ourselves to ending overfishing, but what this decision would do is give us, a state like Georgia, greater flexibility to ameliorate any negative socioeconomic consequences, bridging that gap between 30 and 40. And I think our plan in Georgia is to recommend bag and size limits that will move us about halfway between 30 and 40. So it's respectful of the target, but it also gives us, again, some flexibility to move things forward without having unnecessary adverse consequences.
Thank you, Spud. And to that point, and to Roy's question earlier, Georgia is targeting 35 is our direction, and that is based on the fact that there is strong political opposition to going below a certain number of fish. There's an awful lot of people out there who still want to put fish in their coolers and not just catch and release, and I have to be mindful of that. And going to 40, I can't respect those two options, but 35, I'm trying to find that middle road right now in my state. Chris Pat-Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm opposed to this motion. I think the 40% target has served the species pretty well, considering it's long-lived and the management strategy of harvesting juveniles and not harvesting the adults. Managing to the 30% threshold, even by going a little higher, is risk-prone for life history and management. It's also risk-prone when you consider that non-compliant harvest isn't being considered for harvest reduction calculations for the southern population, making these calculations less conservative. And although the board chose not to factor increasing fishing effort in the future, the board must consider the improvements in fishing gear, technology, and information available to anglers, which makes catching fish like red drum much easier compared to the past. This can increase the chances of anglers recouping their harvest under more restrictive regulations. So therefore, managing to the 40% target increases the chances of meeting this management objective in the addendum. And then finally, just regarding public comment, although I can't speak for the anglers in Georgia, I think the public clearly understood this issue when they supported status quo, and it was more than just fishing guides. It was a wide range of stakeholders. And I mean, this is a species that we really manage for abundance. It's in the South. It's entirely a recreational fishery and largely catch and release. So going to 30%, I think, really compromises the long-term viability of this stock, and also doesn't really meet what this fishery really is. It's one is really driven by abundance. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else? Roy.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, for requesting another opportunity to comment, but very quickly, this puts us in a scenario that's been discussed previously, and I'm still not sure how it was resolved. Specifically, is it appropriate for a northern state to vote on an issue that pertains to a southern stock? So is there any guidance from our commission guiding documents on this at this point in time? Thank you.
At this point in time, no. That is why we established a working group. It's just a working group is about 6 months behind this vote, unfortunately. I hope that, well, I won't put that out there. Bob?
I would answer it exactly how you answered it, with one addition is that, it's up to the individual members of the board. If they feel that this isn't, something that's appropriate for them and they want to abstain, they have every ability to do that.
Thank you. We are running short on allotted time. If there's any other discussion, any from the public online? Seeing none, let's call the question. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand.
I'll call them out. Florida, Georgia,
Virginia.
is that
Virginia.
Virginia, and PRFC. I think that's all.
All those opposed?
North Carolina, South Carolina.
Abstentions?
New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland.
And nulls. So I see 4220. Motion passes. All right, we need to consider. I'm sorry? Oh, 3 abstentions. Okay. Thank you. Okay, let's consider the northern stock then. A discussion on the northern stock. Is there a motion for the northern stock? Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my apologies to staff. I did not provide text to you. But for section 3.4, I'd like to move option B.
Hey, Dave.
Oops, sorry.
We're still in 3-3.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
I'm trying to get out of here. I'm sorry.
Understood.
I got an event in Annapolis tonight, and my head isn't here.
If there is no motion, it maintains. So any interest in from the board 3-3 northern stock? Seeing none, then the northern stock would remain at status quo. Okay, let's move to 3-4. Dave. Actually, let's have Tracy tell us about 3-4 first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, section 3.4. Obviously, this would apply only to the northern region. So the again, the inclusion of this issue in the addendum is due to the some of the concern of the increasing fishing mortality in the northern region, despite the stock assessment saying that it was not overfishing, not overfishing was occurring. That increasing fishing mortality sort of prompted the board and some stakeholders to think about taking some preemptive action to control the fishing mortality in the northern stock. So for section 3.4, northern region management options, option A is status quo, which would be no required changes to current management measures in the northern region. And option B would be Chesapeake Bay jurisdictions modifications. So as it reads is all Chesapeake Bay jurisdictions would establish measures limiting recreational harvest to a board specified bag limit of either 3, 2, or 1 fish per person per day, and establish measures limiting recreational harvest to a board specified slot limit between 18 and 26 inches total length. Finally, option C is North Carolina slot limit modifications, and this would be specific to North Carolina slot, as North Carolina's bag limit is currently at 1 fish per person per day, and it would have it will require North Carolina to establish measures limiting recreational harvest to a board specified size limit between 18 and 26 inches. So for public comment for this option, for option A, status quo, several commenters supported status quo for North Carolina. Specifically, there were 8 written comments and 5 comments at public hearings that supported status quo for North Carolina. And then for option B and C, there were many commenters that expressed support for modifying the the regulations in the Chesapeake Bay jurisdictions or states, and changes to the North Carolina slot. Moving on to public comments. Again, for those who supported status quo for North Carolina specifically, they did not believe there were any issues with North Carolina's red drum population or enough evidence to say changes needed to be made. They argued that North Carolina regulations have been in place for a long time and have been working. And one commenter also advocated that further public input is needed in North Carolina before regulation changes can be made. In addition, one organization expressed some apprehension with making changes to the northern stock without following the process in 3.1, and wanted to make sure there was some flexibility for these states too. However, they did acknowledge it would be helpful to align the red drum regulations for the Chesapeake Bay jurisdictions. So for those who supported option B, Chesapeake Bay jurisdiction modifications, they expressed concern for recent trends in declining red drum abundance and confirmed observations of increasing fishing effort in the Chesapeake Bay due to declines of other species. Commenters expressed support for being proactive to preempt further increases in fishing mortality and to prevent bigger problems later. In addition, commenters who supported option B want to ensure that red drum fishing in these states or jurisdictions remains sustainable. Several comments also mentioned a recent cold kill of red drum in Chesapeake Bay as part of their concern, with the impacts that it had on the population and managing red drum from that. And lastly, again, they did mention that it would align management across the Chesapeake Bay jurisdictions and simplify management enforcement. And for specific regs mentioned in the public comments, there was support for anywhere between a 2 to 3 fish bag limit, and a majority of comments supported an 18 to 26 inch slot. The comments who supported option B supported North Carolina regulation changes as a part of being proactive to protect the northern stock as a whole and to reduce fishing pressure on the resource. For those who did express support for option C, they supported a 19 to 25 inch slot, which according to the calculations we were able to do would achieve 11% reduction for North Carolina specifically. So issue 3.4 was the other section that the AP was able to comment on at their meeting. One AP member supported option A, status quo overall. One AP member supported option A, status quo for North Carolina specifically. And again, without an estimate of spawning potential ratio for the northern stock, the AP member noted that there was no way to properly assess whether the northern stock was above or below the threshold. He also noted that North Carolina's had their current red drum regulations for over 15 years, and he thought that most people in North Carolina believed that red drum were still highly abundant. Therefore, with the spawning potential ratio unknown in the northern stock and due to the increasing numbers of the adult population in a long-lived species, this AP member supported status quo for North Carolina regulations. And then lastly, one AP member expressed support for option B, specifically an 18 to 26 inch total length slot and a 2 fish bag limit for all 3 Chesapeake Bay states jurisdictions. And that brings my summary of section 3.4 to a close.
Thank you, Tracy. And we are very short on time. Joe, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Noting that we are short on time, there is a motion prepared, but I would like to allow my joint bay jurisdiction to Maryland to make a modification to it once it's on the screen.
Very well. I recognize Carrie and motion on the screen.
Yeah, I through this whole conversation lost track of the idea that we also have a lot of, not a lot, but fishermen on our coast that are fishing for red drum. And so if we change Chesapeake Bay regulations in Maryland to be consistent as proposed potentially here in this motion. We're probably going to need to also change what's happening on our coast. I think that's important in an effort to improve our recreational data. If we have a mismatch on our coast from what's happening in the Chesapeake Bay, then we're setting ourselves up to sort of mess with our already data poor MRIP numbers. And I think that also for enforcement, it's important for consistent rules. So I would want not only for these rules to apply to the Chesapeake Bay portion of Maryland, but also to the coast.
So, Gary, couldn't Maryland do that themselves without it being directive of this board and not be out of compliance? Tony?
Yes, they can. And we've been talking about this option within the document itself anyway. And I guess it depends on how you read the language. I think it's a little squishy as to whether it means just the Bay portion of your states or the whole state. I was interpreting it as the whole state, but I could see how someone may interpret it as the state, as just the Bay. But I think one of the intentions, as you just stated, of the document was to have consistent measures with shared water bodies, shared states, or adjoining states. So I think on this, you've said on the record that you intend to have the same regs, and I think you're good there, and that notion is there, and we can make sure that in the meeting summary it is there if you would like. But
yeah, so just to follow up, we can always do that. I think it's important for this board to understand that as a body, we're voting on, having consistent rules across the jurisdictional states and PRFC in an effort to improve our estimates. And by allowing that sort of lack of clarity, we are not addressing clearly the intent to have consistent rules to improve our recreational estimates.
Okay, thank you, Dave.
I wonder if it might help just to remove the words setting the Chesapeake Bay jurisdictions in the parentheses and instead just say that we're setting the Red Drum Draft Addendum Section 3.4 for Virginia, Maryland, and PRFC recreational measures for Red Drum. And then it's automatically where we have jurisdiction to manage these fish, which are our state waters and or shared water body up the Potomac.
Well, it's still Curie's motion. It hasn't been seconded yet. Well, I thought Joe recognized Maryland to make the motion. So it hasn't been seconded yet, so Curie, craft it how you would like.
Yes.
Carrie says what I said. Motion.
All right, so.
Can you repeat it into the record?
Yeah. Almost there. Motion to adopt option B of section 3.4 of the Red Drum Draft Addendum 2, setting the Virginia, Maryland, and PRFC recreational measures for red drum as 18 to 26 inch as a 18 to 26 inch slot with a 3 fish per person possession limit.
Very good. And we have a second by Mr. Brown. Brown, no. Owens. I'm so sorry. When you only comment once a week. All right, we have a motion. We have a second. Is there additional discussion? Chris Pratt Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am opposed to this motion. Going back to the objectives in draft addendum 2 for the northern population, one was to consider changes to the recreational bag limits and slot limits for the northern region of Red Drum to address increasing fishing mortality. And we saw just that in the northern region during the last few years of the stock assessment, and that harvest has only increased more since that terminal year. These are basically these existing these regs here are among those that were developed through the Vaughn and Carmichael SPR analysis, and are arguably less restrictive compared to the existing regulations. And it was already stated before that using that analysis from 2001 is no longer the best available science. It's concerning. In addition to that, because the stock system for the northern population has very little data available for this part of the region. Basically, all the fishery independent surveys are from North Carolina, and there's no wave 1 emirate catch estimates north of North Carolina, and we know that wave 1 catch of red drum occurs in Virginia. And it was already mentioned that that red drum died from the very cold water temps in the bay this year. Therefore, I'd like to make the following substitute motion for the bay, or for the states. And that's a slot limit of 19 to 25 inches and a 3-fish bag limit. And if I get a second, I'll provide just a little more rationale.
Let's get the motion on the screen. Mr. Bassavage, does that reflect your motion?
Yes, it does.
Is there a second? It's a motion to amend. Okay. Yeah, right. It's not a complete it's amending the motion. There we go. Is there a second? Seeing no second, the amendment fails. We're back to the main. Any additional discussion on the main, Dave?
I know we're short on time, but I just want to give a few quick points. I think dropping the bag limit in the Potomac provides some conservation savings. And in my experience as a Maryland angler, that's where you're going to find the highest abundance of juvenile red drum, which are in the slot. And so going from that 5-fish bag limit down to 3 is a savings. Of course, Maryland is going from a 1-fish bag limit up to 3, but we have these fish coming through 1-year class in that slot with a small window in the middle of the year. Twice in the last 15 years, we've had catchable, legal red drum in Chesapeake Bay waters for recreational anglers. And I think what's most important, 5% of the bay harvest. There you go. Some technical information that's really important. The reality is we have a lot of work to do to better analyze this stock and understand what's happening in the Chesapeake Bay with it, especially in Maryland waters as we see it increase in abundance. And we're committed to doing that as best we can. And so I think just this smooths things out for recreational anglers, and we need that in this space right now. So call the question, please.
Thank you. Any discussion from the public or online? Seeing none, let's call the question. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand.
Maryland, Potomac River Fisheries Commission, Virginia, and Pennsylvania's not on this board.
3, 4. Okay, 3. All those opposed?
North Carolina,
Abstentions?
New Jersey, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Delaware.
And nulls. The final tally is 3-1. Was that what I saw? Yes. Okay. Very good. Thank you. So that motion passes. Do we need to tackle option C for North Carolina? No need to tackle C. That moves us to 3.5.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one second. I'll start. Section 3.5 is de minimis provisions. This will apply to both the northern and southern regions. And the purpose of this section is to basically update the de minimis provisions that are in Amendment 2 to meet the requirements of the 2022 de minimis policy that the policy board put into place. So status quo would be continuing to have no specified de minimis requirements that are found in Amendment 2. Option B of Section 3.5 would update the de minimis provisions to align with the guidelines in the 2022 de minimis policy, and it would considered a state de minimis if the average total landings, commercial and recreational together for the last 3 years is less than 1% of the total landings from its respective region. So de minimis would be split regionally with option B. It has not been done that way thus far for any commission species, but it has been proposed for red drum due to the separate stock assessments and separate stocks. And option B also outlines a process that could be used in the future if we ever do need to establish regulations for de minimis states. The PRT and the TC could recommend measures for de minimis states, and the board would review that recommendation and approve, which the states would then implement. And other guidelines in Amendment 2, including that states must include de minimis requests as part of their annual compliance reports, would still apply under this option. And public comments for this option are very straightforward. The AP did not comment on it, but all comments we received in regards to section 3.5 were in favor of option B, as it would modernize red drum management. And with that, I can hand that back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Tracy. And I know there was an awful lot of support for de minimis 1% 3, but we really haven't answered the question whether de minimis is going to apply region-wide, coast-wide, or to the stock. We have.
Yeah, you decided that last time.
Oh, we did.
Yeah, it's going to be region.
Stock. Okay, I guess I missed that. Apologies. Discussion on the 3.5. Is there a motion for 3.5? Spud.
I move we approve option B to update de minimis provisions to section 3.5.
A second from Mel. Any additional discussion? Boy? No. Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to object necessarily, but for two other species and any species that are kind of the harvest is MRIP estimates are the motivating factor. A 1% is a very interesting threshold to deal with. So we talked earlier about how we'd need to have a discussion on a 1% threshold for croaker and spot. So I think it's a little weird to be putting ourselves in this position that we're going to say that now when, I have not looked at what that means for the red drum stocks and regions. But I do know that we, for two other cyanids, we discussed that we may need to revisit that. So I'm a little concerned with this motion, but thank you.
Tracy.
Thanks, Joe. To that point, we will, I've started the process of gathering all the PRTs for all of the cyanid species to look into that question. So even though we're putting the 1% into place here, that is something we are going to be working to look into more holistically for all of the cyanid species of, is that 1% appropriate or not?
Adam.
Just what I believe is a cleanup note on this section. The document referenced sub-options, and we didn't wind up with sub-options, so the final version would not reflect that, I would assume. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Roy?
Just for clarity, Mr. Chairman, as I read this, it says the PRT and or the TC would recommend commercial and recreational measures for de minimis states. That leaves it entirely up to them. I presume the states would have the ability to recommend something in terms of baseline measures. Are we saying that the PRT and the TC would have to approve that?
What the TC or PRT put forward would only be recommendations to the board, but the state would probably be the main focus of putting forward that, or in the discussion of what's appropriate compared to states that are already de minimis with measures like New Jersey and Delaware.
Anyone else? Seeing none, public, online? None. Let's call the question. Is there any opposition to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes. Next, we need to deal with implementation of this addendum. Do we have a motion for implementation? A time certain, Ben?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to set an implementation date of August 2026. August 30.
Tony?
What?
While they are working to put that motion up, just to let you know, we're going to tackle agenda item number 5 via an online vote, and we will hear from CJ in just a moment and try to. How long are you? How long?
August 31st.
Ben, if you could work with us a little bit and have the board work with us a little bit. So we want to, when would the states put their proposals in first? When would you want the states to have so I believe, if I'm correct, South Carolina and Georgia would need to propose some measures. And then the board would consider those measures, and then everything would be in place by August 31st, is what I think you're saying. Right?
Correct. Working backwards, I'm not sure about, I don't want to,
Yep.
the second suggest proposal date, but implementation date would be August 31st. So working backwards from that, what we need.
So then we could if helpful, we could review those proposals in May. Would that work for this board for those two states? Or would you want to submit proposals by for the February meeting and be reviewed then?
Speaking for my state, it's going to be interesting because, I have to get past whatever I propose, and that's not a certain. So we could certainly provide to you in the spring what our intentions are. And my intention would be to have it implemented by the August date.
Do you think you could submit something by March 1st? Like what is it that you all want to submit your proposal so the TC can review and then present to the board?
I would say May 1st. When's
so the spring meeting would be that first week of May. So we would need it ahead of that. So we would need it either if we knew it was coming April 1st, we could do that because we could pre-establish the TC meeting immediately, but we would really need them to be on time.
And just as a reminder, the proposals don't have to have your final option selected in it. You can have several different options you're considering if you don't know exactly what it's going to be yet. And all of those can get approved, and then you can select which one later.
Very well. I'm looking to my Southerners in the back as they are conferring. Ben?
I heard, sorry, we were talking, so I didn't hear what you needed, Doug, but May is good with us, or April, May timeframe for submitting proposals works for South Carolina.
In order to make the May meeting, it needs to be earlier than that. So April 1st would be the submission of proposals, and then an implementation and we've always worked off the first of the month. I've never seen us do the end of the month. So August 1st or September 1st.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, make it September 1st. Okay. Very good. All right, we have a motion. Ben, would you reread that motion, please?
Move to set the following implementation schedule for the section 3.3 and 3.4 states to submit proposals by April 1st, 2026. The board will review and consider approval of proposals at the spring 2026 commission meeting and states to implement regulations by September 1st, 2026.
Thank you. And a second by Dave. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, is there any opposition? Seeing no opposition, motion passes. And that concludes the addendum. Oh, we have to approve it. Yeah. We got to approve it. That's important. Malcolm, you have a motion.
Just a quick point. I love this schedule and I think it can be done, but South Carolina, all the regulations are legislatively mandated. So we'll be going to the legislature starting in November, and it has to go through the House and Senate subcommittees before it goes to the legislature. So while we're going to be trying to hit this timetable, if we're not, it's not because of our efforts.
Understood. I think we will hold the compliance letter knowing that you're moving forward. Motion. All right. Joe Grist.
Move to implement draft addendum 2 as modified today.
Second by Dave Sikorsky. Approve. Move to approve. All right. Let's go with the maker and the seconder. Joe Grist, Dave Sikorsky. Any discussion? Chris Bat Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since I've been on the losing side of almost every vote this week, I might as well continue my losing streak. But I'm gonna oppose this addendum just for the same reasons as I opposed the striped bass addendum yesterday. I think the decisions made for red drum in both regions are very risk prone considering the life history of this stock. And I'm afraid we're going to find ourselves in a worse situation when we look at this again. I hope I'm wrong, but we've seen red drum at low populations before under management measures that were deemed later inappropriate, and I don't think we really moved the ball enough to protect this stock long term. Thanks.
Thank you for that. All right, roll call. Or all those in favor?
New Jersey, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Virginia, Potomac River Fisheries Commission, Maryland, Delaware.
Opposed?
North Carolina.
Abstentions? Nulls? Seeing none, the addendum is approved. All right, thank you all very much for that. CJ, let's go to item 6, the update on the Atlantic Croaker benchmark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, everyone. I am the SAS chair for the current assessment for Atlantic Croaker and Spot. Just as a reminder, when we lost our lead analyst due to job changes earlier in this assessment, the SAS recommended we decouple the Croaker and Spot assessments and focus on Croaker first, while picking up Spot assessment once Croaker was completed. So most of this update will pertain specifically to Croaker. So the last update to the board occurred at the spring 2025 meeting, where we mentioned we're moving with modeling 2 separate stocks for Atlantic Croaker, a mid-Atlantic stock, which is Carteret County, North Carolina northward, and a South Atlantic stock, which is anything south of Carteret County through the east coast of Florida. The SAS completed the data reviews on April 28th and May 22nd to discuss the various data sources and life history traits for each region or each stock separately, with special attention to the southern stock, as most of the data sources had been previously excluded. The SAS met again on July 29th to discuss regional model configurations, while keeping in mind some past model stability issues while moving forward with the models. So we also created 2 subcommittees from the SAS. The first one is a modeling subcommittee that is meeting bi-weekly to discuss model progress. There is progress with both models. We have 2 running models. However, not all data sources have been incorporated yet, and there are some still diagnostic issues we're working through at this time. So the models are not yet ready for an assessment workshop, but we should be ready early in 2026. A second subcommittee was created, which was an environmental subcommittee. It was formed on July 29th. And this was to address research and analyses in the terms of reference that are not directly addressed by the stock assessment models. Topics include environmental and non-fishing impacts on croaker populations that can't be captured in the models at this time. The subcommittee has met twice and is moving forward with examining the most recent literature and additional data analyses to answer these questions of interest. The committee will meet one more time this year to progress with the analyses and provide write-ups for the report within the stock assessment. So the current timeline, even though we have pushed the assessment workshop into January or February of 2026, the remainder of the timeline should be fairly well on track. We're intending to go to peer review sometime in May of 2026 and still believe that the assessment will be ready for the board in August of 2026. As a reminder, we will begin SPOT once croaker goes through the peer review process. So our intent is to start the SPOT assessment in May 2026 and go through peer review through sometime in April or May of 2027 and present SPOT assessment to the Scienid board in August 2027. So this was just a brief update, but I will gladly take any questions that you may have.
Any questions for CJ? Seeing none, having moved agenda item 5 to online and we have no other business, motion to adjourn, hands everywhere. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.